Good morning, Sonia. Can you hear us okay?
Good morning. I can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, Juliana. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning, Lynn. Can you hear us okay? Do you mind if I do a quick sound check, make sure we can hear you okay?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to get the virtual background up.
No problem. Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, Doug.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, all.
Hey, good morning, Brendan. Can you hear us okay? Come back to you. And good morning, Lynn Valentere. Can you hear us okay?
I can, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Lynn. Good morning, Ed. Can you hear me okay? We'll come back to you, Ed. Just let me know if you're having any troubles. Hey, good morning, Sean. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. It looks like we can see you, Ed. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Can you
Oh,
hear
perfect.
me?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll try to stay in front of my computer. Apparently, when we were meeting last week, they said they're having a little difficulty picking up my voice. So if you lose my voice, just let me know. I'll try to maintain this position for the next 10 hours.
Perfect. We appreciate it. We can hear you great right now.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. This is Deb Noodleman. Great to see so many faces popping up on the screen. Aaron, how close are we to full attendance?
We're pretty close. It looks like Scott Hughes has joined us. Scott, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And
Had a little problems.
Brendan, can you hear me all right? Oh, great.
I got you, Aaron. How am I sounding?
Perfect. Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate it.
Good morning. You bet.
We're close, Deb. I'm just looking for, oh, there's Greg. So I'll just promote Greg and then we'll be there.
Awesome. You let me know when we hear Greg's voice, we'll know we can go ahead and start.
All right. Hey, Greg, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you.
Just so you know, this glow and sweat isn't flop sweat. I just finished a good workout, so.
Thank you for doing that for all of us today.
Did you swim the Columbia River?
All right.
Actually, Ann, I am in Michigan. I came home to vote, and so coming back this weekend.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is 8 o'clock, and so I'd like to get started. My name is Deb Noodleman. I'm part of the facilitation team here for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, and we certainly hope you're all staying safe and healthy and welcome you to the kickoff for the Executive Steering Group. I'd like to immediately hand it over to Secretary Millar and to Director Strickler to go ahead and open the meeting.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Roger Millar with the Washington State DOT. As we all know, addressing the existing issues with the aging interstate bridge is critical for the long-term transportation, economic, and livability needs of the region and truly nationally. The success of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program relies heavily on our ability as partners to advance the replacement of this aging Interstate 5 bridge with a seismically resilient multimodal structure. Partnerships are important to us, and we appreciate the time that you and your staff are dedicating to work with us to advance a solution that provides improved mobility while honoring our history and our community. Our collaborative work together in this venue is important for our region. This program centers on equity, which requires meeting the community where it is and providing opportunities for meaningful two-way engagement. Centering equity means improving our planning and engagement to ensure equitable policies guide our work. As the 12-member steering group, will be looking to each other to provide regional leadership recommendations on key program issues of importance and concern to the community. Our work as transportation professionals here at WashDOT and at ODOT is to meet the needs of tomorrow, and this is a key program for helping to address challenges that will be faced by the region as it continues to grow. I'd like to conclude by really thanking Greg for his work. I have every confidence in him based on what I've seen since he's come to the project, to the program, and our work together in the past in Michigan and Maryland. So I'm excited to have him on board, exciting to have all of us around this virtual table, and looking forward to a good morning's conversation. Thanks again for being here.
Good morning, everybody. Chris Strickler, Oregon Department of Transportation. It's great to see so many familiar faces again. Feels like we've been in many of these conversations before, so I'm looking forward to the next step and the next iteration. I do want to send my appreciation to all of those that have been involved up to this point and will continue to. It's great to see, like I said, Mayor Ann's, good to see you again. Mr. Washington, Ms. Ballantyre, thank you for your time and your dedication to this process. You're in for a long haul, and we're looking forward to your work as we continue. And to all the other friends that we have here that I don't have on my screen, but I certainly want to say hi and thank you to our partners at Metro, the ports, just across the board. It's great to see everybody. I won't repeat very much, just a little bit of what Secretary Millar just opened with, but I do want to say that this is not news to anybody. This bridge is locally, regionally, nationally significant. We've taken a run at replacing this bridge once before, and I think we have moments in front of us that will really test our patience as we continue with this effort. But I'm excited that everybody's come together and recognized the importance and the significance of what we have in front of us. The program's success really relies on everybody coming together and our partnerships. There is a sense of urgency. And while we're all dealing with interesting things right now, whether it's COVID or wildfires that we're dealing with right now in both states, but I can tell you from my own personal experience, just what we're responding to in Oregon, it might feel like things like this should take a second stage or back burner. And I can tell you that those types of feelings don't get projects done, as you well know. And so we have to continue to be empathetic to the efforts that are going on across both states, but recognize that it's important to keep our conversations moving forward on something like this. Our collaboration will be important. And that collaboration is how we'll learn from each other and how we'll grow as we start to think about the history, the community, those that have been here before, meeting people where they are. This program has to be and will be one of the most equitable efforts that we bring forward in either state, in my opinion. We have to ensure that we bring equity to the forefront. We have to recognize the communities that we're in and the communities that we serve. And in some cases, the communities that were here and have long been lost or moved or displaced or what have you as part of this work effort. It's really important that we recognize those moments and bring those efforts together as we think about the urgent next steps, because our economy needs us right now. And this bridge is really a significant impact to our economy going forward. I've got a lot of confidence in all the faces that I see on the screen. I've worked with a lot of you for a long time. I'm excited about the next steps. This is one of the most significant things that we'll work on. For some of us, we feel like we've been working on it almost our whole career. So with that, I want to thank you yet again. I recognize what each of you brings to the table. I recognize how difficult finding time for things like this really are. But this important effort and everybody being here today really shows the dedication that we have in this region. So I'm looking forward to that. I finally want to say, Mr. Greg Johnson, he's new to the area. He's come in. He's provided introductions, not just to himself, but to his expertise and to what he's able to accomplish elsewhere. I'm really excited about Greg coming in. He's been putting up with my personality very well so far. For that, I congratulate him. And I'm really looking forward to what he's going to bring and the unique perspectives that he'll be able to kind of lead this program with. As most of you know, this is the first time we've come together with a single program administrator. That's the right choice. Greg's the right person, and I'm excited about next steps. I think now I'll turn it over to Mr. Johnson. Thank you, everybody.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks both to Secretary Millar and Director Strickler for the very kind words. So many of you I've interacted with on a one-on-one basis, and over the last 4 or so months since my arrival in the area. So I'd just like to say thank you for all the kindness and patience that you've shown me so far. This is our first huge step in getting this project on the way to its inevitable completion. Having the executive steering group on board is tremendously important. This is a group of very powerful, very thoughtful, and folks who are dedicated to getting things done. So we're looking forward to the work that you will do. We're looking forward to the consensus nature of this group, and we can build consensus and take that all the way through to up to the bi-state legislative group to make sure that we have no one who feels uninformed or uninvolved in the decisions that are put forward. So, Deb, is it time for my update on where we've been?
Not quite yet, Greg. Thanks for asking. I have just a couple of housekeeping items, if that's all right. And then we'll jump into introductions, and then we'll go straight into the where we've been and where we're going. So everybody, good morning and welcome. We just want to take this few minutes if we're getting used to living in a virtual world, but just a real quick checklist. We see that for our executive steering group, we've all got you here by audio and by video. We're going to encourage you to keep your video on. We've really been appreciating everybody seeing each other's faces and feeling like to the greatest extent possible you're in the room. I do think, for this group, for the ESG, if you'd like to speak, it's a small enough group. Let's just try to let a back and forth happen. You can also use that little hand in the corner to raise it. We also want to welcome our audience today, and we're thrilled to have audience, staff, teams from the ESG, as well as the public with us. In the audience, there will be a short, brief time towards the end of the meeting for public input. We have about 15 minutes. If during the public input time you would like to speak, all you need to do is click raise your hand to get in the queue, or if you've joined by your telephone, hit *9, and that will actually raise your hand to get on the queue. It is important to know that you need to be in the Zoom meeting in order to join the public input timeframe. So if you happen to join by either the live stream on TV or YouTube, that's okay for now, but by the time we get to the public input, which is about half later in the meeting, we'll do the agenda in just a minute. Make sure to cross over and join that link to join the Zoom meeting, and that's what gets you in for public input. If you're having any technical difficulties, we've got a phone number here on the screen for help, 253-241-0131. So that phone number is 253-241-0131. So next slide. Do we have a second one, Aaron, on webinar, or just this one? No, that's it. Okay, so we have a couple more to tell you. Also in the audience, we do have closed captioning available, and both in the Zoom and the YouTube, as well as the ability to click over and have Spanish link available for yourself to be able to see and listen in Spanish. And both of those are available. Again, if you're having any trouble at all, please go ahead and call that number for help. I think, is that the only thing I need to say right now, right? Okay. Aaron, that's my list, yes? Okay, great. Okay, so then I think for now, Greg, why don't you go ahead and we'll go through the introductions, and then when I do the agenda, I'll do the rest of the logistics. So thanks. Ready for the introductions? I think you have the co-chairs, and then I'll take it around the table, Greg. Are you on mute? I think you're still on mute, Greg.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
One of the key things that that we have done to ensure that we have a appropriate level of engagement and community input is we are in the process of creating a community advisory group. And for that, we have selected 2 co-chairs. And the first co-chair who I'd like to introduce you to, and I've had a great opportunity to chat with her and get to know her better, is Lynn Valenter. And I'm not going to read her bio on the screen, but what I will say in my time in talking to Lynn, Lynn is a great facilitator and getting at the truth of issues. She is very engaging. Is what we need. So her role as the co-chair for the community advisory group also places her as a member of the executive steering group. So you will see her participation in both places. So she has done some wonderful work in the Vancouver area. And once again, as you can see by her things she's worked on throughout her career, is very well recognized and has a level of expertise that we appreciate being brought to this program. And so the other co-chair, her counterpart, is a gentleman who I've had the pleasure of meeting just within the last month and a half, and his name is Ed Washington. So Ed is, once again, I'm not going to read his bio, but his story is so tremendously interesting. Having grown up in the Vanport area, having been affected by the flood that moved his family into the Albina community. So Ed has a deep history in the community in North Portland, as well as his professional career, in which he's done some wonderful things, both with Metro Council and Portland State, and a variety of other roles that he's undertaken. So these two co-chairs for the Community Advisory Group, we think are outstanding and will lead to a great engagement with both communities on both sides of the river to bring this project to success.
Great. Thank you so much for those introductions, Greg. And it's a warm welcome to both of you, Lynn and Ed, and we're so pleased to have you here with us. And just really great to have you right here at the start as we're kicking off the executive steering group today. So what I'd like to do now is head once around the virtual table, give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. I always call it kind of warming up the conversation, and we'll come back to the co-chairs at the end. So you'll get the last word at the introductions. And we're hoping everybody could take just a brief minute or two, share who you are, your role here in the executive steering group, and if you want to do a few opening remarks or any updates from around the region. Okay, and I'm just going to take it off my participant list. And so if I could, Sean, you're first, if you don't mind. Sean Donaghy, so CEO of C-Tran.
Yeah, my name's Sean Donaghy. I'm the CEO of C-Tran here in Vancouver, Washington. We provide bus service in Clark County and also commuter service into Portland. Obviously we have a stake in the game as a function of a public transit provider. We're proud of the partnership that we have with our friends at TriMet, Portland Streetcar, and all of the other regional transit agencies. And we're excited to see this project move forward.
Great, thanks so much and welcome. Next up, Doug Kelsey, so CEO TriMet.
Well, good morning. Yes, I'm Doug Kelsey. I'm the general manager here at TriMet. TriMet represents the transit for the 3 counties in the metropolitan Portland area. And as I've mentioned before, I missed the first time this didn't work, and glad to be participating in this round. So very important project for the mobility of goods and people. So great to be here.
Great, glad to have you with us. And somehow, there you go, Doug. Your video actually went off as you were talking and came back on now. Oh, now you're gone, but now we see you. Just so you know, right now we can see you again. Thanks for that. Yeah, appreciate it. Next up, Metro Council President Lynn Peterson.
Morning, everyone. Lynn Peterson, Metro Council President. Good morning. Good to see former Most Honorable Ed Washington amongst us. So thank you so much for that. And good morning to everybody. I just want to say thank you for all the work to date from everybody to get us to this point. This is a very important project for both region, the greater Portland, Vancouver region. So I appreciate it and look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you so much and welcome. Next up for the Regional Transportation Council, Board Chair Scott Hughes. Oh, you're on mute, Scott. I think we have to help take you off. There you go. Yep.
Scott Hughes, I'm the current chair of the Southwest Washington RTC, and I'm also a port commissioner. I'm the chair of the Port of Ridgefield. The RTC has had a long history of supporting this project, really beginning in 2002. We're excited about it. We want to see this thing completed. We've done a number of things throughout the community over the years, conducted many community hearings. We've had briefings on this, numerous plan policy resolutions we've passed. So it really, quite in summary, we want to make sure the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project is a regional priority, which we know it is. It should include a multimodal solution, and it should be done as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Great. Welcome and thank you. Next up is City of Vancouver Mayor Ann McInerney-Ogle.
Good morning. Good morning from the north bank of the Columbia River. I was thinking that I'm at the table simply because if we do nothing, this bridge will fail and fall into the river with severe consequences to the economic vitality of our entire region. And I'm so tickled that we're starting again. I think I can get rid of those 2 file cabinets of some of the old stuff that we have in there. But I'm excited to see that the partners around the table are committed to a successful, quick completion of this work. I know we can build this bridge together. Thank you so much. And it's good to see all of you.
Great. Thank you so much and welcome. Next up for the City of Portland, on behalf of the Mayor Ted Wheeler, is Deputy Chief of Staff Sonia Szymanski.
Hey, good morning and thank you. I see a lot of familiar faces. Hi, everybody. I am Sonia Szymanski. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Wheeler, here on behalf of the mayor and the city. And I bring the same sentiment that I've heard from everyone else, which is twofold. The first being that we're really excited to be at the table and to be at this juncture working toward a new and better bridge that will bring more and better travel options to people who live and work in our community. And second, that we are really appreciative of the thoughtfulness that the project team has brought to questions around governance and partnership among lead agencies. And I know that we all know that's a non-negotiable ingredient to eventual success. So I know we'll keep it up. And lastly, I just want to strongly endorse this being an 8 to 11 meeting and not a 2 to 5 meeting. So thank you to whoever made that choice.
Thank you so much. We'll keep that in mind as we plan future meetings, and welcome. Glad to have you with us. So next up for the Port of Portland, Chief Public Affairs Officer Kristen Leonard.
Good morning. It's so nice to see everyone. Just want to reiterate everything that's already been said as it relates to our excitement about this project, and just looking forward to partnering toward success in whatever form that takes here in the near future. I also want to reiterate comments about just appreciation to all of the team for maintaining momentum on this work. There has been a lot going on, and I think it's just such an amazing team on both sides of the Columbia that we've got working on this project. The other thing I want to say is thank you for the intentionality and focus on community equity. What is this going to look like to make sure everyone feels like they've had an opportunity to share their perspectives and voice. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen. Welcome. And on behalf of the Port of Vancouver, CEO Juliana Marler.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. My name is Juliana Marler, again, CEO for the Port of Vancouver. In terms of assets, we are the 3rd largest port in the state of Washington. Just want to again reiterate my thanks for all the work that's been done to date. Of course, replacing the I-5 bridge is a top priority for us. It's a huge component of our multimodal network, and replacing it will support our ability to remain a leader in our local, national, and global economy. Again, just appreciate the opportunity to have a seat at the table. And we hope to bring our expertise in freight mobility to this critical project, and look forward to collaborating with everyone and supporting our economic interests in the Vancouver-Portland metro region. So thank you.
Thank you and welcome. And then now back to our co-chairs. So if we could first hear from interim co-chair Lynn Valenter.
I just want to acknowledge the really thoughtful work, as other speakers had mentioned, about the nature of inclusiveness and the nature of partnering with the community so that we come along together rather than have asynchronous communication and input. I would also just acknowledge the wisdom of the many voices that came together and decided that having explicit community input would facilitate the outcomes of the project. In higher ed, we're kind of part of neutral convening, which is, I think, an important element of this group. We are also not strangers to a variety of really thoughtful people having a variety of varying opinions. And so I think it's terrific that both Ed and I are able to bring that background to this important work. And just personally speaking, I don't believe there's anything more important to the future of our communities than to have this bridge be resolved. And so I'm excited to be putting my weight behind a successful outcome. Not sure what that looks like, but a successful outcome nonetheless. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Lynn, and welcome. And to interim co-chair Ed Washington.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure being here this morning. I'm definitely getting used to the virtual world. But, you know, I think one of the things that's so exciting for me being part of this committee is that when I joined the Metro Council back in 90 or 91, I forget exactly what year, but I think a couple of years after I was on the council, I went to a meeting over in the Vancouver Bricks, and it was a meeting on building a bridge across the Columbia River, and that's been a couple of days ago. And so here we are again, and I'm excited about it. And I think this time it's going to go because when I look around the table and listen to all of your input and the fact that you've included the community in it so much and the whole sense of equity, I think we can get through it. We can get through it this time. So I'm just happy to be part of it, and it's a pleasure. You know, Lynn and I have had a chance to chat, and I'm really excited about working with her. I think that together we'll do a good job for you all on behalf of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Ed. Welcome to all of you. And so just a couple more minutes on housekeeping and logistics. First, I want to also welcome, there are a couple other faces on this screen, and they're the presenters that you'll be hearing over the course of your meeting, and we'll have them introduced as we get going. You also have on this screen your facilitation team, and so there's 3 of us, just so you kind of know who's who here. And then also for the captioning and the live streaming, those stay with us here on the screen. So we'll make sure all those names and faces get introduced as we progress through the meeting. I also want to acknowledge both for the executive steering group, your staff are present here in the room. And, you know, if we were in an actual room, they'd be with you wrapped around the table, supporting the efforts. And we want to thank them for their hard work and helping to prepare for today's kickoff meeting. I also want to welcome and thank the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program team, the staff that are and consultants that are working hard to help prepare for the meeting, and they're here also in the virtual room. And as importantly, and the most important, is that our audience and our public are with us, and we can't thank you enough for making time and space to be here with us today. We know how challenging it is to be in this virtual world. We know that there are many other important things you're doing to stay safe and healthy, and we're just grateful for you making time and space to be here with us. And we hope you're experiencing it in a way that helps you know how much we appreciate and value your participation. So thank you to everybody for being here. Then just really quickly, oh yes, Greg.
Yeah, if I could, you've been speaking and doing a lot of telling the folks and orchestrating. So I'd like to tell the folks a little bit about who you are and what your role is.
Thanks. I always forget that part. Go ahead. Thank you.
So Deb Noodleman will be acting as the executive steering group facilitator. Deb is here with her team of Aaron Westling and Alexandra Lohman, excuse me, to provide independent, neutral process support to the ESG team and to the overall Interstate Bridge Replacement Program team. So Deb is a principal and senior mediator at Kearns and West, and many of you have met her in an earlier iteration of partnering to kind of get this back kicked off. So you know Deb's her personality and her get it done skill set. So we're happy to have Deb as our facilitator. She's been doing work on issues like this, important issues, for over 20 years in the Portland area, working on complex projects with diverse interests. And her major theme is consensus building. So we thank you for taking on this challenge, Deb.
Thank you for the kind words and the introduction, Greg, and it's an honor and a privilege to be with all of you, so thank you for that. And so, Aaron, if you go ahead and put up the agenda, we'll just do a really quick walkthrough and then we'll jump into our topic. So we hope you all received your meeting packets in advance. We also have all of this posted up on the web. We hope it's been available. We get it in 508 compliant format to make it usable for everyone. We're just about to finish this introductory section, and we have two big buckets of work, if you will. The first for you, Executive Steering Group, is really kicking off the process itself. We have some nuts and bolts type activities, some laying of the landscape, a little bit on the where you've been, where you're at, and where you're going, as well as importantly, the foundational work of confirming your draft charter and adopting it as a charter by the end of your next meeting. So we're hoping to get through those topics, really take your clarifying questions here if you have issues or high-level concerns that you want to raise today, and what it takes to really start to create the glue that helps you become a team working together as we advance this program. Then we'll take a 5-minute stretch break. Hope you get some fresh air, catch a beverage, and then come back. And the second big bucket of work is the important equity considerations and standing up of a community forum for the program. And important work of, again, laying the foundation of leading with equity, of using a lens throughout the overall program and integrating it into, I keep thinking about this interstitial tissue, so that it becomes an integral part of how everyone does their work. And the second leg of that, I think, three-legged stool, with the ESG being the third, is really standing up a community forum and really beginning the work to convene a community advisory group and talking to you and getting your critical input to make sure that the doors are open wide, that the way people come through is fair and open and transparent and credible to this wide and important community that you all live and work in. And we're hoping today even that it may be credible enough and resonate enough sufficiently to you as an ESG to be able to concur and to allow it to begin moving forward after today. But we'll wait. We want to wait and get your feedback and see if it needs some more work and what it takes to really get that kind of support and be ready to go. We'll have an opportunity for brief public input. And so just to name it, I have it on the agenda at 10:35. I do pretty well of watching the time. I may need to flex a bit, but we have 15 minutes on the agenda. We'll take the public input as hands get raised. I only have a limited time, and so the instructions are that depending how many hands come up, I'll do simple math in my head and divide it by the number of people. If we hit a limit and we run out of time, please remember there are ways to submit comment either in writing via the link that we'll be giving you in the email, as well as by phone and voicemail. So we're hoping that before, during, and after, you always feel the doors open for your input. And finally, we'll confirm topics for your next meeting, which is Monday, November 30th, 1 to 3 p.m. We'll make sure we confirm any next steps, and we'll summarize and adjourn no later than 11 o'clock. So 3-hour meeting, lots to pack in. Any questions? I want to see if anybody, and you can also just wave or take yourself off mute, ESG, if you have anything. No? Okay. So the only other thing I want to say is, and I think you all know this, as you're listening, stay on mute. When you want to talk, take yourselves off mute. Try to leave your video on. And then just a few ground rules, and I tend to leave them as gentle reminders. One is, let's try to stay on task with the agenda we have. It's a lot to cover. Focus on listening to understand and asking questions to clarify. There is so much expertise in this room and so much to share. And just keep asking and understanding each other and those diverse interests that add value. That's why you're all here. Focus on substance and content, staying soft on people and their style. Seek common ground when it's possible, and when it's not, help explain why not, and try to help each other with that alignment around common ground. and then providing a balance of speaking time. So if you happen to talk a lot, step back a little bit, please, and make space for others. If you're quieter, please push yourself forward a little bit. And I hope I can have permission to call on all of you. I once in a while like to head once around the table if I could, just to kind of get that full composite of the room. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. All right, so Greg, now we're back to you.
All right, thank you, Deb. So just a quick update on where things have been over the last couple of years and where we're headed to. So there has been the consensus of two governors to say this project or this program of updating and replacing the I-5 bridge between Oregon and Washington is a critical piece of infrastructure that deserves their attention. So they have pledged $50 million in combined funding to move this study forward. And we are, that funding has been approved by both states. There's a bi-state memorandum of intent that both governors signed about a year ago. And we have also, there's been the creation of a bi-state legislative committee for oversight and guidance to shape the program work. So we have a very interested set of legislators on both sides of the river who are giving us input and making sure that they are involved so we don't have any late surprises or folks who feel like they have not been a part of the process. And finally, one of the dates that is pressing us forward, Federal Highway Administration has a repayment requirement if they have put federal dollars forth and a decision has not been reached to either no build or to move forward. So that repayment was to happen this year. They have granted us an extension until September 30th of 2024. So that's one of the dates that I have tattooed on my forearm to keep in mind that we cannot miss that date. So this is important to both states and to both communities. So next slide. So this is a timeline of where things are and where we're going. So one of the first pieces of consensus that the region has done was to hire a program administrator, myself. So I came on in early July, and it was a result of a national search with input from a number of your organizations and the DOTs to say, yeah, we need someone who can act as a program neutral and make sure that all voices are heard. Another important thing that was critical to moving this forward was bringing on a consultant team, a general engineering consulting firm. They have been brought on board as of September. And finally, the process that we're in right now is convene the advisory group. So ESG is the first step. Deb talked to you about the community advisory group, and we're also looking to establish an equity group. So these will be the three pillars of consensus and moving issues forward back to the program team. So we have been making some significant progress. Come December 1st, we owe a progress report to the legislature, both legislatures, as well as a draft conceptual finance plan, which is the team is diligently working on. And next June 30th, we have to demonstrate that we have made significant progress towards the beginning of the federal environmental process. So we are very much keyed into these dates. Next slide. So the bi-state legislative group is once again one of the key oversight and directional entities for this program. And each state legislature legislature identified 8 members to provide that direction and oversight to help shape our program work. So I've sat in 3 formal meetings with those folks, as well as having some one-on-one conversations with different members to bring them up to speed. So July 16th, we reviewed previous purpose and need and visions and values, and to tell where we have been to that group. August 6th, we had some initial guidance on how we're going to do community engagement in a COVID environment. So also we're looking at how we will receive feedback on the approach to develop purpose and need, visions and values, and the finance plan. And just this past October, last month, we had a review of previous transit and river crossing alternatives with the bi-state legislative group, and to demonstrate what had happened in the past, where the conflicts were, so they had a great understanding of that issue. So we also have both November and December committee meetings with the bi-state legislative group scheduled, where we will tell them about what we are doing with ESG and forming the other legs of the stool to support this program. So, and if you're looking for any of the materials, agendas, presentations, and videos, they are available on each state committee webpage. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible as we move forward through the process, making sure that whether it's members of ESG, members of the community advisory group, or the public in general, will be able to see exactly what we're doing, what things we're talking about, so they will be informed. Next slide. So we had a competitive process to bring on a general engineering consulting firm. WSP, which is an international engineering consulting firm, was selected as the prime consultant in close partnership with Parametrics. And the great thing about these firms is they have a great familiarity not only with the region, but with this project, as many of their members worked on the original CRC. Now, folks will take that as a red flag. I take it as they understand what the process was and where it failed and why it failed. So bringing that and being unshackled by the history of the past project is going to be tremendously important. So the consultant team has done a fantastic job. They committed to surpassing the mandatory 15% DBE involvement goal. So they have set a voluntary goal of 20% for themselves. And they have brought on a diversity lead who is tasked with ensuring that this goal is met. So the team also has a chief equity officer, Janelle Bell, who you will meet later in the day, to work across disciplines to ensure equity principles are embedded internally within the team and throughout the whole project. Next slide. So our next steps in early program development is to convene a community advisory group. So we're going to ask the executive steering group for your concurrence in moving forward with establishing that community advisory group. We are continuing to develop a framework for the equity group, and this equity group will serve several different purposes. Once again, to ensure that equity in all of our decisions is being considered. They will be the folks that comb through and make sure that there are no unintended consequences, and that all voices and all underrepresented groups are reflected in the decision making. We also are looking to implement comprehensive community engagement activities. And once again, in a COVID environment, this is going to be challenging. We're going to do a lot of electronic things. We cannot gather folks to sit in a big room together until COVID is under control. But we are going to do some innovative things to make sure that the community is engaged and know where everything is at and their voice is heard throughout. So one of the key things that we will be doing in the upcoming months is developing a purpose and need and the community vision and values. Purpose and need is a requirement in any project that has federal oversight. So, and it's the true north that we compare. Once developed, we compare every decision against that purpose and need. And does it meet the need and the purpose of this project? So you will hear myself and the team talk about purpose and need and community visions and values. And lastly, identifying a range of alternatives to analyze. We're not going to bring you warmed over soup. We're gonna put our best ideas towards the problem and looking at the circumstances out as they exist today, rather than what happened. We are going to use information that is still relevant from the CRC study, but our alternatives will be alternatives that are developed based on things that exist today in today's world. So next slide. So Deb, I think this is you.
Yes, and so I want to check executive steering group members if you have any quick clarifying questions. We have kind of these sections of foundational information, but either kind of wave your hand or go off mute if you have any. This is all good framing up information. And I also meant to say to the audience and the public here, these slides will be posted to the website right after the meeting. So they'll be available for everybody as soon as we wrap up today. Okay, so we'll keep on going. So next up, we have this section of really what's it going to take to kick off the executive steering group process. And you all know this, there's some good foundational work to be proactive and make sure that you know how this is, you kind of drink tea at the beginning and set the stage and build the table and then begin your substantive work. So there's three core pieces that we've been thinking about. One is, of course, the partnering that you did in the spring, and we'll have folks explain the kind of who, what, where, when, and why of that. The purpose and value of the executive steering group. Why have a group like this? What's its value to the region? And then the ESG charter. And so what is the use of having some kind of a documentation to align yourselves as you kick off the process? And so to help us with this, Greg, I think you'll introduce Carly Francis and Brendan Finn. Yes?
Yes. So many of you know Carly Francis. Carly has had an invaluable part of the history of both the CRC and the restart of the bridge replacement program. I've developed a great friendship with Carly. I tell her she kicks me under the electronic table as I start straying from where I'm supposed to be. But she serves as an advisor to the IBR team to reflect the history of where things have been, but also the knowledge of Southwest Washington and how the modern day iteration of this program impacts the Southwest Washington. And her counterpart on the Oregon side is Brendan Finn. And Brendan, I actually, my desk, right now, my temporary digs in the ODOT office are right around the corner from Brendan. So we get a chance to see each other when we do go into the office. And Brendan has just been tremendously helpful in bringing me up to speed on the politics and the and knowledge of the Portland area. His background is so extensive, and the things that he's done so has brought a breadth of understanding for me to what my purpose and challenges are for this program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carly to walk you through the partnering process.
Good morning. Thank you again, Carly Francis. I'm the regional administrator for WSDOT Southwest region. The partnering process really sought to engage our key local bi-state partner agencies, which you all represent. The role that each of you has as a public or quasi-public entity in the area that has a direct operational or ownership role in the process going forward is why we started the conversation with all of you, recognizing that there are many, many other parties to engage, both above, below, beside, and around all of these entities, but that there's a direct role and impact that you all have in this process. The facilitated sessions that occurred in the spring, the DOTs convened that conversation because of the critical nature and role of broad regional support in moving anything forward. And so those facilitated sessions sought to convene a conversation to determine what kind of a process might help build that broad regional support that could effectively reflect community values and could also successfully advance this program to construction. In that last bullet, there's a lot of context in that because that is intended to reflect the wide variety of policies, constraints, expectations of others, and the need for construction to advance that rests in obtaining funding. And so recognizing that, funding expectations and requirements are special and need to be considered in the process as well. So it reflects, meeting all of those expectations of others and drawing that into the process as well. Out of that discussion with all of you, there were two key recommendations, which was to convene an executive steering group. And we're so excited to have you all here today to start to bring that to fruition, to provide regional leadership recommendations into the process. And then also, I know that was critically important, as we've heard earlier today, and we'll continue to hear, that community voice and values are so critical to moving this forward. So the other recommendation was to convene a community advisory group to provide a solid forum for community dialogue. That will be one of many, many ways to engage the community, but it provides a focus point for that community dialogue. And when there are so many constraints and considerations around a program, we are excited about that opportunity for those conversations to happen and those pushes and pulls to happen in a comprehensive way among community representatives.
Thanks so much, Carly. And I think we're going to hand it over to Brendan for the next piece.
Correct.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Deb, Carly. Good morning, everyone. This is exciting. I'm Brendan Finn. I'm the director of the Urban Mobility Office within ODOT. We're coordinating a lot of the regional efforts on behalf of the state to manage congestion and increase mobility throughout the region, of which replacing the Interstate Bridge is a huge part of. So excited to be here and be a part of it. One of the things you're going to hear that we want to impart on you before you leave today is this constant message you've heard from Secretary Millar, you've heard from Director Strickler, from Program Administrator Johnson, and from Carly and now myself, is the importance of broad regional support. So we will continue to beat that drum and call upon you to help guide us in that effort. That's why we're here today. So I'll cover this slide a bit on objectives, but I just wanted to put that out there first. And I happen to have a little background in that as someone that spent nearly 20 years with one of our regional partners there at the City of Portland. And I'm tickled to see my former colleague, Sonia, here, where we'll all benefit from having someone of her caliber at the table. So why we're here, our objective around the executive steering group, I got my few bullets here I'll read off rather quickly and we'll move into the work. We know the importance of coordinating with our legislative requirements and then our broad stakeholders we have throughout the region. You and the Citizens Advisory Group are going to help us identify those and engage with those. Obviously, we want this program to provide safe, healthy, reliable, affordable transportation that supports jobs, education, culture, and recreation. And you're going to hear more about the emphasis that we're putting on equity from Jonelle, which is great. We want to make sure the program is viable for federal funding, obviously, and to make sure that it can be successfully implemented with your guidance. So again, I'm going to be very brief because everyone loves brevity in these types of presentations. So Deb, I'm going to kick it right back to you to go a little bit more into the process.
Great. Thank you so much, Carly and Brendan. Really appreciate it. You know, ESG members, there's this piece that we're doing right now about the why. Why have a group like this? What difference does it make? And I often, as a process geek, like to say you have to pass the so what test, which is that you have to show that there's some value and there's some purpose for being. And you all during your partnering workshops push back on each other and us to ensure that if you were going to use precious resources out of this region, that you were going to do it to create something better than the alternative. You don't need a group if you can get things done without having the group. But if you're doing something in a group setting that creates better outcomes, there you start to see the value. And you created these core expectations and the core objectives that Brendan and Carly just talked about. And what you said to each other, and what we're saying to the region now as we kick off this process, is you're choosing to work together collaboratively. You're choosing to use your regional leadership and the power that it brings to this region and bring it here to this table. And you're also choosing to work constructively. There's a challenge for people about staying kind, about finding the upside, about looking for that glass half full and more. And that's another choice that you're making as this group. You're also saying that none of this work is going to happen and none of this is going to go right if you don't work with communities from day one. And that's what you're doing here. You told yourselves and each other you wouldn't even open the door till you had your two co-chairs. You said, we will do some draft documents, but nothing's going to happen till our community advisors are with us at the table. And that's what you're doing today. You said that you're going to lead with good science, you're going to lead with good data, you're going to use the technical information that's been used in the CRC and it was there, bring it forward, give it a fresh look, and use all of that in an open and inclusive process to make really good, solid, substantive decisions. And then you said that it's got to be funded. So you're going to model collaborative leadership. You're going to take it to the finish line in a tangible way that says, how are we going to have a viable funding package to go with it? And then finally, you're always going to stay in touch with your bi-state leadership. You're going to look for your legislative expertise. You're going to look for it all the way out of that bi-state legislative group, the partnerships, and the all-important elected groups that will be these overlays with your publics and with yourselves. And it was really impressive to build a list of expectations like this. You'll see more of it in your draft charter. You housed it in a way so that you could keep it, normalize it, and use it as you go forward. And that's what you said to each other, and that's why we're here today. So next slide.
Yeah, if I could jump in real
yes. Feel free, Greg.
Jump in real quick to, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. If I can jump in real quick, just to reemphasize that collaboration is going to be key to us being successful in this. And I came from a background, an area in the Detroit area where for years, the city of Detroit and its suburbs fought against each other and missed many opportunities. And as I see them now, Detroit is starting to reap some of the negativity from those early decisions. And what I bring to this project is a memory of those type of failures. And so I'm going to be the one who's going to be waving the flag to get folks' attention to say this is key, critical, that this region comes together collaboratively to get this project done. Because I've seen what the results are when a region cannot interact in a collaborative manner. So I just wanted to add that from my personal experience to tell you how important that collaborative model is to me.
Yeah, really helpful, Greg. And it's appreciate your sharing your philosophy as we think through this together. So next slide really builds on what Greg just said, that The other piece that you talked about was the value of the collaboration and why use consensus. And so you had talked about this bridge kind of in a metaphorical way, showing a way of bringing together the region, that for the Washington and Oregon communities, that another interest you had was creating truly a bi-state and a regional space. And that you said that by doing this in a way that shows both collaboration and the way Greg just talked about, and using a consensus model, meant that you'd have to work hard to have each other's back. That's what consensus requires of people, is learning and understanding each other's interests. Why would a person behave that way? Why do they care so deeply? What is it I need to understand about that community? What are the priorities and the core values and the needs for those communities? And how can we take care of each other's communities in ways that builds this really strong, resilient outcome? And when you do decision-making in that way, which is what you'll see it as we walk through the charter, what it brings is this, it's more than the glue, it's the traction. It's the traction you need to implement really complicated projects over time. And ultimately, I know that's why you're all here, is for the results. It's not just about the talking, it's about getting the work done. So choosing to work in a consensus setting is going to send a strong message. If you as an executive steering group reach consensus and send recommendations to program leadership, that's telling them the leadership, the communities, the equity of this region is pushing forward in a collective way. And I know, and Director Strickler and Secretary Millar will probably talk more about this as we go along, but to them, that's saying a lot. And I don't know if I should pause here now, Director Strickler, or wait a moment. Do you want to wait? You're nodding. It sounds like I could just keep going for now. But I think what's, from my experience of this and watching in complex multi-party programs, this is where the power lies, is for this group doing the hard work. And I want to say one last thing here. Not reaching consensus right away is not a problem. All it means is that you have to do some more work. You have to figure out how to align and how to help understand why somebody might not be able to say yes, and then figure out what does it take to get to yes, okay? So moving on to the next slide. So I have just a couple nuts and bolts pieces that I'll get through, and then I'll get to the charter, and then we really want to leave enough time to have some question answer discussion. You heard some of these words about kind of what's rolling out, and just really quickly, high level, your planning calendar, and we'll keep updating this and filling it in as we go. But right now, through the end of the year, the key is to get this executive steering group stood up, and to get the equity and community advisory groups moving forward, and to the greatest extent possible, ready to stand up, so that early next year, if we can, in January, you've got this kind of three-legged stool stable and ready to go. Because right off the bat in January, we want to get started on the substance. And there's a lot to talk about, and people are ready to engage with you and with these other groups around purpose and need and vision and values, the two underlying and critical layers that Greg talked about in the beginning. Because then rolling out of that is the alternatives analysis. So through the end of this year, this kind of kicking off and standing up of the groups, early next year, beginning and taking the deep dive on purpose and need and vision and values, and later next year into alternatives analysis. So next slide. So the other couple pieces that we want to pull together today, and I think you remember this, but I'm going to talk about the charter, but the underpinnings of the charter came out of your partnering workshops and those two documents that Carly was talking about. Well, I'm going to talk about the documents, but the image that was up there and the content of what you were creating, and you housed that, and we sent this out to you, and it's also posted on the website, is one, the issues list. So what's the content of the work for the executive steering group? And the second is your conceptual partner expectations for the program. And I would just encourage for the audience and the public listening to take a good read off those. It's really helpful, good information about kind of the what's the reason that this group will exist, and what's some of the work. This is just kind of early work overlays for the work. And then the third piece that goes with it is the charter itself. And just quickly, because I want to kind of open it up so you have some time to talk. The reason you have a charter is really it's talking about talking. And it just gives you a chance to clarify and confirm with each other how you're basically going to engage in this kind of a multi-party collaborative process. And I know that all of you have been in these kinds of settings before, but I often talk about it like an insurance policy. you just do a check at the beginning to make sure that you're taking on an approach that offers you the greatest opportunity to work in a constructive, productive way. And the other piece that goes with it is it just clarifies roles and responsibilities, expectations. What's the charge of the group? Why are you here? What are we hoping you will accomplish? And in what fashion? And it gives you those common expectations about how you'll work together. It has pieces on communication, trust building, respect for divergent views, creative thinking, seeking mutual outcomes, and authentic community engagement throughout. Next slide. And so we have built for you a document that really is based on all of your conversations on, if you will, best practices for how to do multi-party collaborative work that's interest-based. And yes, it is slightly lengthy. We wished it could be shorter, but it's also, we hope for the public that's here, a document that gives you some of the background and the context for this program and gives you some of the really important information about what's at stake for the region in moving this process forward. And then what are these groups? Why have these groups? How can you access them? What are each of their roles and how they're going to work together? So you see there'll be an introduction, charge and responsibilities, the decision-making process, guiding principles, core values. What does it mean to be a member of the executive steering group? What does it mean to have alternates show up and participate? We know you all have tables behind the table. You have people you have to go back to and consult with for ultimate decision-making. And ultimately, the program itself has a huge amount of both statutes, regulations, and things that must be complied with. And so all of those layers matter at this table. And then the normal stuff you see with process about meeting principles, format, ground rules, public input, communications, media schedule, all those kinds of pieces and how deeply they matter. But the interest with this charter is to set for you best practices, how to do it in a way that really walks your talk, that says if you're going to be engaging with community, if you're going to use an equity lens, what does that mean for you as a group? And so we hope you're going to find it in this document. We know we sent it out in advance. We were just mostly hoping today that we get kind of some high level feedback on it, or if you have any major heartburn issues that are starting to come up, and you could go next slide too on this. And, you know, as importantly, just see if there's anything else you want to discuss about the charter today. But what we're really focusing on is that you take the next 2 to 3 weeks, read it carefully, use your staff level group to come back with any specific feedback or track changes. And then when we meet again on November 30th, we are really interested in seeking alignment and concurrence so that we can adopt a charter and move on with the rest of your business and work. Okay, so I have covered a lot of this really quickly because I wanted to make sure that you had time to talk to each other. So we're open to taking any questions you have on either the ESG purpose, value, roles, responsibilities, decision-making, any questions at a high level on the charter, or just anything else you want to talk about. We have about 20 minutes, and so we'll just kind of open it up. Erin, you can take down the slide and maybe we'll just leave it open. Thank you for listening so patiently. I know we gave you a lot of information at the same time. What are your thoughts or reflections, folks, as you were kind of listening to all this and absorbing it? It's okay to either just talk or wave your hand and go off mute, whatever works best. President Peterson, sure, go ahead.
Just say thank you. I know that there's been a lot of work on this for many, many months, and looking forward to finalizing it in our next meeting. But I have no questions or comments because it's been so thoroughly done. So thank you.
Thank you. Others, reflections, comments, feedback, thoughts at this point? Go ahead, Doug. Sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for the thorough work on this, where it sits now. In fact, you know, from my perspective, subject to others' viewpoints, I think this is good to go now. But I leave it to others and that discussion. So thanks for the work done to get us where we are. So I'm ready, subject to when others are.
Great to hear. And it may be nice if each of you even just says, just a few things, because that's actually helpful to know. If it feels like things are set to go, if you think there's some more work that needs to be done. Scott, you look like you were going to say something. I still can watch body language of people leaning, even on a screen. Yes.
Let me unmute this. Yeah, like as far as the RTC, we would want to have the board review this so that, we could talk as one. But I do want to say how important it is that we do work together, and I appreciate the document for that. Our last go around, we were pretty divided, and when you are divided, nothing's going to get done, and you lose all kind of momentum. And this is so important that we get this bridge done. So I do appreciate that document as far as that progressing this process goes. I remember the words of an old friend of mine who's on the commission with me. And one time he just mentioned, he goes, a lot of times we may have a 2-to-1 vote, but after that vote is done and I'm on the one side, I support the voice of the other two. And I think that's really critical. We can't get too engrossed in our negative voices here, because we have to proceed on this thing, and being together will get us a lot further.
Thanks for that, Scott. Others as I head around? Mayor Ann, yes, go ahead, thanks.
Good morning. Well, we also agree this is an absolutely wonderful document, and staff has done a good job listening to all of the different individuals and groups concerning that. I specifically like the guiding principles and core values and the way they are worded. So thank you so very much.
Appreciate it. Juliana, sure, go ahead.
I'll just concur with Mayor Ann's comments as well as others. I think there was a lot of great work that went into this document, and I don't see anything that needs to be changed at this point.
Thanks for that, Kristen.
And at the risk of saying the same thing that everyone else has, this is fantastic work, and you managed to capture a lot of information and guidance in 10 pages. And while, we always wish things were shorter, I think it's really impressive, the work the team has done. And so there is nothing, we definitely want to spend some time with our colleagues at the port with this document, but this is impressive work. Thank you.
Appreciate the feedback. Thanks for that. I'm going to keep kind of heading around. Sean, any thoughts at this point?
I do not. I think it was summed up. I think the only thing that I've stated was concern over the document potentially being too long at some point. And I think that, reflective of everyone's comments, that it's probably in sort of that right place for what we need for a document that reflects the position that we're currently in right now and what we're trying to accomplish down the line.
Sean, I wanted to say, because a couple of you talked about it and I kiddingly was talking about it being long. And one of the thoughts, we did some testing with staff and with some people outside of the planning group to say, does this feel long? And it's a feedback they gave us for outsiders who may be just learning about the program or, don't have the same kind of history and background and context that many people that do the work that all of you do. They actually appreciated it being a little bit longer. So we didn't cut as much because they liked the background and the context and the charge, and you could kind of one-stop shopping. You could stop in at the document and learn a lot of things. I will ask, as you're looking at it over the next 2-3 weeks, if you do see places we can help make it more reader friendly or make the words make more sense, like to a person who's kind of dropping in at the first time, we'd love that kind of feedback. And thank you. I just know it's a struggle to find it, kind of right size it.
Yeah, I would say that I believe that it is currently in the right place. I think my concern was more of if we start to get beyond this point that we're at now, it could be slightly confusing.
Okay, helpful to hear. Okay, and Lynn, were you going to say something?
I was. So first of all, thank you for holding off on convening this group until Ed and I were appointed as interim co-chairs. I appreciate that. Given that, I felt called upon to really take a close look. And I think it calls out very specifically and thoroughly how the community voice will be reflected and heard. This is just a question, as I'm a little later to this than others. First of all, I normally advocate for brevity because I don't believe people read beyond the first paragraph. But in this case, it's a foundational document, and so many of us will likely go back to that and refer to it. So I do think the comprehensive nature makes sense. I did want to ask in the section about the, well, sorry, I'm not finding it right now, but the section about the different groups, it calls out CAG, but it doesn't call out the equity group that Greg and others were talking about. And so it doesn't preclude additional groups, but I didn't know if that might want to be added in at such time as it becomes formalized, but I'm not advocating yay or nay, I'm just kind of calling the questions.
Yeah, helpful feedback. I will put a note for that. We knew at the time of the partnering workshops that there would be the equity officer, and that equity would weave its way throughout. We didn't know yet about there being an equity advisory group, and I think you're right. We're naming different groups in there. So I just took a note, Lynn, on that. Okay, to figure out how to articulate that piece. Thanks. I'm just kind of heading around the virtual table. Doug, Kelsey, did you say anything yet? Anything you want to share at this point? And then I'll also check with Sonia, and I'll come back also to.
I believe I've already spoken already. So.
That's what I thought, and I just wanted, yes, I thought I had you.
I'll have to work on my way. I have impact then.
No, it's not that. It's that sometimes on my screen I'm moving around my little thing, and sometimes when someone speaks, it moves. You can put it on my brain. Don't worry. Now you all have to help me because now I'm scared. I know. I still have to call on Ed though, right? And then Sonia, go ahead. Any thoughts, Ed, at this point? Just any reflections on or questions on any of the things you've heard this morning? Oh, you're on mute, Ed.
I don't have any questions, but I think it's an excellent framework, and I think that anytime you get something this comprehensive, there's going to be some minor tweaks. So, I think it's enough that it can be tweaked where it need to be. So I'm fine with it. It isn't deafening or anything like that. So it's workable. And thank you very much for all your hard work on it. I think it'll be easier to put some meat on it where needed.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. So I was going to check with Sonia, but I can't tell if she's had to step away. So I'll wait and see if a voice comes back.
No,
Okay.
I'm here, and I apologize for not being on video. I don't always have a great connection up here in St. So if I get kicked out, I'll be right back. I appreciated what you said. I am a person who is relatively newer to this work than many folks, well, probably than everybody on this call as a participant. And I took a good look at the document yesterday, and I really appreciated its thoroughness. It is a really helpful foundational source document that I've got saved on my desktop and I plan to return to frequently. So I also, like Kristen, look forward to taking this back to folks on my end and then to confirming it in our next meeting. So thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And I'd like to go to Chris and Roger also, if either of you have comments, reflections, anything you want to add at this point, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Deb. I wanted to thank the team for pulling the document together and listening to all of the issues and comprehensive nature of the comments that have come forward. I too think the document is in great shape. To the earlier point by our co-chair, Lynn, on topical groups and things like that. I think as we go forward, I'm going to guess that we will have other topical groups that come in that are really important. And I certainly don't want to say that the equity group is a topical only group, because I think it's going to be broader than that. And I'm looking forward to that discussion. But I do want to make sure that as we continue to evolve in the project team, that we recognize that this charter won't preclude our ability to do that. I think we'll have the opportunity to bring some of those other groups on board and continue that dialogue, especially given the fact that this is a very important discussion and foundational to the work that we have going forward. So I see the document in great shape, happy to add language that is more specific to our equity group, or recognize that we're going to go forward with the equity work either way. And so I'm looking forward to either of those. I too am really comfortable today. I'm recognizing a few comments though from our partners at the city and at the port that want to take a little bit of time to make sure that there's some other voices within their groups that need to weigh in here. And so I'm looking forward to endorsing it at the next meeting and hearing those comments as we get there. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Roger?
Yeah, from my perspective, first, like Chris, I'd like to thank everybody that put a lot of hard work into getting the document to where it is. I think it's really important that we take time to organize before we take off. And so I'm not a huge proponent of rushing to failure. So let's make sure everybody is comfortable with who's going to be making decisions and how we make decisions, which is what this is about. Take the time. It'll never be perfect. We can always modify it, but I think it's in a really good place. But everybody, all of the partners need to feel that they're in that really good place for us to truly be able to collaborate going forward. So thanks for the effort to date, and looking forward to developing the project under this guideline.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anybody I missed, or anybody that wants to come back and make a few more comments at this point? I can actually see you all at the same time, so thank you. Really appreciate it. So I think what I'm hearing at this point is good, helpful foundational information sharing. People are really both satisfied and pleased with the amount of preparation and where the charter's at specifically, and that we have some next steps so that folks can take it back, check in. Just, I really like, the comments. I call it the go slow to go fast. It doesn't mean it takes too long, but it means you're being intentional and thoughtful. And that's what I heard. So take the document, give it a careful read. The door is open. We'll be checking in with staff. Give us your feedback. And then we would appreciate if you could come back to the November 30th meeting ready to endorse. And if for whatever reason, if you have some major heartburn or some high level concerns, we'd be grateful if you could try to get those to us in advance. I have a goal to kind of minimize joint wordsmithing on screens to the greatest extent possible. It is a painful, sometimes necessary exercise, but if I can avoid it on this one, I'd be grateful. And get your feedback, make this document work for all of you, and then see if we can get that check mark on the 30th, okay? Really appreciate it. And I'm looking across the room and not seeing any other questions or concerns. So what we want to do at this point is thank you for all of the early planning work here that's allowing us to work to formally stand up your group. And we're going to gift you with a break, okay? So it's 9:25 on my screen. We'll take a 5-minute stretch break, okay? And then we'll start again at 9:30. You go ahead and leave your video on or off, but make sure to put your screen on mute or your audio on mute. Thanks. And we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Hope you got a good stretch in, maybe a little bit of fresh air. Wherever you're sitting on the landscape, I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. Welcome back to our audience. Welcome back, everybody. And as you come back, if you're comfortable turning your screen back on, it lets me know that you're back with us. And if we could go ahead for my team and go ahead and move beyond the stretch break slide onto the next set of slides, I'd be grateful. Thank you. Okay, and I see Greg. Greg, you're going to help me introduce this section, yes?
I am.
Let's get, I think I need just another 30 seconds if you don't mind.
Okay.
Make sure everybody with. I will say, as we're warming back up and everybody's getting back in their seats, I do have a habit of first name basis, and I hope you're okay with that. And if at some point people want me to stay with full names and titles, I'm happy to. It's just a quick way to say a name. So just that it is a bit of my style. So I hope that's all right with everyone. And I think we're okay to go, Greg. All right.
All right. Well, you've heard us talk a lot about equity and engagement with the community. So the two folks who I'm going to introduce next are going to be key in facilitating both equity and the community forum. So Janelle Bell serves several roles on the team, and his major role is as lead on equity, but he also, along with Lisa Schauer, will be facilitating the community advisory group. So these are both great team members, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of words, but they have backgrounds in both communities and with a number of the organizations that are sitting at the table. So without further ado, Janelle Bell.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Greg, and good morning, committee. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and for those of you I've not had a chance to meet, I look forward to meeting you one day in person. I am going to go through just a couple of slides to try to ground us in some of the thinking that we've been having around equity considerations. And I think it's such a great metaphor as we talk about building a bridge and replacing a bridge. And, you know, we're also building a bridge with our community. And in many instances, certainly some instances, we are repairing bridges with communities. And so we want to keep that in mind as we do our work. So next slide, please. So we start off with this key question, which is, how do we really ensure that equity is incorporated into all elements of the program? And as we sort of ponder that, we are coming up with some initial thinking in terms of how we might advance that. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of assumptions and considerations that we've made. The first is around capacity. We know that given the ESG and a CAG and what they'll be tasked with, will these bodies really have the ability to give equity the focus it deserves? We know how critically important equity will be to the communities in this corridor. We know that it will be the way in which this project will be successful. So how do we really elevate equity in the program to ensure that we're meeting this goal? We know that the CAG should be a diverse representation of the community. However, this does not necessarily mean members will be well-versed in transportation equity issues, which will be critical to ensure that those voices are represented. And the final thing is the ESG. All of you have really indicated that equity should be prioritized. And so we've been kind of thinking about, well, how do we do that to really demonstrate it really is a priority? Next slide, please. So in kicking off the equity work for this program, there are kind of three things that we have begun working on. The first is an equity assessment, an equity review, a literature review to some degree, if that's a helpful example. All of your agencies have existing policies and programs relative to equity, and we want to make sure that we're learning from that. We want to make sure that we are learning from best and promising practices, as well as the communities that you are engaging in and the tactics by which you are engaging those communities. So we start off with doing a synthesis of that material. The second thing is around, we know that this project is within a regulatory environment, both with FTA as well as FHWA. And we know that there are equity principles that will guide our work, whether we're talking about environmental justice or Title VI. And so we want to make sure that whatever program we develop integrates that thinking. Finally is to do a deep dive and an assessment of the work. There was a lot of equity work that was conducted on the CRC. And so we're spending some time kind of finding out what some of those items were as well. Next slide. So Greg referenced this, as well as a number of others. We are conceiving the notion of an equity advisory group. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But in thinking about what the work program for that body would look like, is first defining equity. The interesting thing about equity, I'm sure if I were to ask each of us how we define it, we would all have different definitions. And all of our agencies probably have different definitions as well. So it's going to be really, really, really important for us to come up with what equity means for this project. And second to that is defining what the desired outcomes and matrix are to achieving that definition. We got to first define it, and then we have to identify ways by which we track progress so that we can communicate back to the community that we're making good on those commitments. It's really important that we frame the historical context. We know that the project corridor is on the backdrop of a lot of history, whether that's our tribal communities, the I-5 construction. We know the gentrification and displacement that have occurred as well. And we have to be mindful of that history as we begin to work with our communities of concern, because for many of our communities, there's a trust deficit. In order that we build trust, rebuild those bridges, we first have to acknowledge the historical context that this project resides. Spending time on the community engagement plan to make sure that it's thorough and intentional as it relates to really integrating the voices of historically marginalized communities. And that looks and sort of differently in a lot of ways, but one of which is to make sure that we're paying attention to our LEP communities, that we're making sure that we're not assuming all of our engagement will be English only, for example. Tactics such as working with our community-based organizations and our faith communities, and as well as being creative in terms of audience and approach, not assuming that the community is going to come to us, but being really mindful about going to the community and meeting the community where they are. Identifying strategies to avoid, minimize, and or mitigate adverse impacts. That's going to be critically important as we start to get to design and, of course, later down the road, construction and the NEPA process, really engaging the community in that discussion, such that we're designing a project that is sort of holistic and really engages the whole community. Having conversations around the finance options, making sure that the community is really weighing in to ensure that any potential impact on communities of concern we've thought about, such that we can lessen the impact on low-income residents. And then, of course, review and input on design decisions of importance to the community. And finally, the DBE and the OJT program. Andre Ba, who's on board as our DBE lead, will be leading this effort, making sure that as we talk about building this project, we're being mindful of the economic opportunity it could provide for our communities. Next slide, please. So next steps, and I should note that we'll be coming back to you on November 30th to provide additional fodder But prior to that, in fact, next Thursday, I'll have an opportunity of meeting with all of your agency's equity leads. So we've asked your staff to help us identify equity leads within your organizations. And so we have our first meeting next Thursday, at which we'll have a good dialogue about a draft equity charter for the equity advisory group. We want to have them weigh in on that, as well as help us determine and identify recruitment strategies, as well as sort of what the committee ought to do moving forward. So we look forward to providing an informational presentation at November 30th meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. Lisa?
Oh, I think Lisa, you might be on mute. Not quite. And Erin, can you see, is she double muted perhaps?
Let's see.
Could we help? We're gonna take a sec to see if there's a technology issue on this side, Lisa.
No, if Lisa, I don't know if you've joined by your phone and your computer.
No? Not yet. Huh. And so when we look on our side, Ray and Erin both, we don't see, Lisa's not muted on this side.
Correct.
Sometimes there's a key on your computer might have gotten tapped. That's a mute F1, not that, no. Occasionally.
Or Lisa, if you look down next, oh,
Can you hear me now?
there you go. Perfect.
Yes.
Oh.
That is Lisa's voice. She's here. All right, welcome.
Of all times for technology issues. So good morning, I'm Lisa, and really just so thrilled to be a part of this team and see this as such a tremendous opportunity to build and bridge communities, and so excited to be working with John L. And we really think that this partnership beyond this executive steering group and the staff that has supported the executive steering group, that our co-chairs, Lynn Valenter and Ed Washington, will be pivotal in helping us to ensure that we're convening an advisory group that is reflective of our communities. So John L. and I are going to split the slides here and make sure that we're kind of providing you with a high level framework so that you have some understanding of what it is that we're envisioning this community forum will look like, and how we will move forward with standing up this group. Next slide. One of the things that we think is so critically important to share is that this community advisory group is just one component, a really important and significant component, but just one component of our overall strategic communications and public engagement plan. And what is really at the center of this plan is a commitment to equity, to hearing all of the voices that want to be part of this process, and to be able to be really clear about which moments make sense for us to really have an engaged and a two-way dialogue between our community and our executive steering group, our community advisory group, and our Interstate Bridge Replacement Program leadership. So what we are really hoping to do is just to frame out this piece of this plan, and we'll come back to this group with more details as it relates to our overall approach to public engagement. Next slide. Some of the key characteristics of this community advisory group include, as John L. mentioned in his presentation around equity, is a representative group from the community that is really helping us to understand regional needs, issues, and concerns. That it is a forum for two-way dialogue, that we are showing up and listening to what the community needs and wants. That this group is serving to advise and to provide recommendations to both the ESG as well as the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. we feel it's so important to integrate all of these different advisory groups, which we were excited to see that so much work had been done with the ESG to ensure that there was that threading that was going on with the community advisory group co-chairs with the ESG. And we see it's also critically important to continue that same kind of threading with the equity group as well. So the charge of the community advisory group will be to ensure that a broad range of regional constituent interests will serve as stakeholders on this community advisory group. We anticipate that this group will exist through program development and that the charge may be reviewed and reconsidered. And why we think that's important is because we know that sometimes there are voices that will be directly impacted during the delivery or construction of a project. And we'll just want to make sure that we are intentional about the charge and the charter of the community advisory group as we transition within stages of program delivery. We also envision that there'll be topical subgroups. We think this is important to share just in terms of the additional groups that might be set up as ad hoc committees to really dive into specific details relative to this program. It'll be important that we have the time with those smaller groups and that they're bringing back any recommendations and insight to the greater community advisory group. So membership on this advisory group, we're committed to a diverse range of perspectives. I think you've seen that in a couple of the slides already. I know that you also heard that in Janelle's presentation on equity. It is truly the center of the way in which we are approaching this community advisory group. We are hoping to create a group that aims for approximately 25 members. We recognize that we haven't started our recruitment or our nomination or application process, and that 25 number is simply a goal. We want to also remain flexible enough to ensure that we have the right stakeholders represented, and there is a long list of stakeholders that we think are important to ensure we have had inclusive outreach with. We are anticipating recruiting and adding to this group 5 members at large through an application process. And the other 20 or so members would be recruited and they would be brought in through a nomination process. We see the ESG as being a critical component of that recruiting and nomination process. And we anticipate working directly with your staff to ensure that your voices and that our partner agencies have a role in helping us to stand up this community advisory group. We've also decided to put in a number here that we're recommending that really reflects the need to have voices from our communities. We are saying that we're hoping for about 80% of our members will live in the Southwest Washington and Portland metro region, and that we really are committed to a balanced representation from both Oregon and Washington. So I anticipate a question might be raised in terms of why not 100%. And the reason that we chose 80% is that we thought that it was important to recognize the significance of this project to our region and to both states, and that there may be members of stakeholder groups that don't live in Southwest Washington or Portland, but that are essential to have their voices at this table. We also believe that there's a great opportunity, because we are one community and one region, to find those that may want to serve on this advisory group that perhaps live in Southwest Washington and commute every day to Portland. And therefore, that user, we wouldn't want to say is a Portland representative or a Southwest Washington representative, but rather a representative of our region and reflective of our community. And I think at this time, I'm going to pass it one more slide. When members are selected, we really want to ensure that we're clear about, are they representing their individual voices, or are they representing an organization? We think this is important to share because we know that there are a lot of organizations that would likely want a seat at this table, and we can't have every organization represented. We are committed to that balance, and so what we are proposing to do is have organizations that choose to have a member serve, and that member is representative of that organization's input on specific topics that we'll review as a community advisory group, that they may choose an alternate, but that alternate will have to meet the selection criteria that we've put in place. So if for some reason that particular representative can't continue to serve, we'll work with the organization to replace that member. If an individual resigns, we'll go through an application process. Again, that applicant must meet that selection criteria. And I think at this time, I'll turn it over to Janelle to talk
Great.
about stakeholder groups.
Great, thank you, Lisa. As Lisa indicated, our goal is really to ensure a level of depth and breadth as we put together a representative community group. And this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the areas that we think are going to be critical to ensure that we have represented: environmental, climate action, environmental justice perspective, historic perspective. We know that this project, of course, has national parks such as Fort Vancouver. That's going to be really important, as well as a lot of other history we talked about. River interests, neighborhoods, both in Southwest Washington, as well as North and Northeast Portland. The trucking and freight perspective is going to be critical. Business organizations, BIPOC-led organizations, which of course is Black, Indigenous, people of color-led organizations. Community-based organizations. We know that both in Portland as well as Vancouver, we have a number of active CBOs who bring great perspective that we'll want to have captured. Civic, professional, economic development perspectives, DBE, minority contractors, the contractor as well as the AGC community, social service and nonprofits, education, labor, tribal, active transportation, transit dependent, tourism, and of course the art community. And we'll have time for discussion here in a second, but if there are some interests that we've missed, please jot those down and communicate that to us as well. Next slide, please. As we think about the eligibility criteria, we really want to make sure that applicants have a demonstrated ability and can commit to working together in a collaborative and constructive way to advance the best possible bridge replacement project for I-5. That's going to be an incredible ingredient to be able to move this work forward. That they actively participate with a commitment to transparency, that they embrace transparency, equity, listening to understand, and active participation in meetings. And as Deb mentioned earlier, that there's a notion of seeking for solutions through consensus, and to create a two-way dialogue with constituents if they're representing a stakeholder group, making sure that they're staying engaged with their constituents such that they can really represent those perspectives. Next slide. We anticipate that members will fall into multiple categories, but we will seek members who include frequent users of the existing interstate bridge, reflect the perspectives of communities of concern. Those impacted directly by the project is going to be important to have represented. And of course, the balance we talked about a great deal, and Greg always reminds us of, is that this is a bi-state project, making sure that we have representation and voices represented from both sides of the river. And of course, representing our multi-generational community, finding opportunities to engage young people in this process, as well as folks who are more seasoned. Next slide. And I turn it back over to Lisa.
So we have a proposed schedule for activating the community advisory group that is very quick. And I think we heard some initial comments about the fact that there is a need to move forward with ensuring that the program work is pacing at the same time the community has had the opportunity to provide input. So we think those are critically important, which is why you'll see that we're hoping to be able to move forward sooner rather than later in our outreach and recruitment process. And I just want to speak for a moment about some of what we're thinking here. We know that in order to reach communities of concern and to reach communities that we don't see show up to every potential community advisory group, that we need to go and meet them where they are. And given some of our constraints with COVID-19, we want to create an opportunity to have that conversation, not just in English, but in several different languages. And we want to provide the opportunity for some of these informational sessions. That's going to take us a little time to be able to do that. We also want to be really clear about what we're asking for when we ask the community to serve on this advisory group. We want to make sure that those expectations are laid very early in the process. We also have to balance that with the need to move forward and seek some real engagement and some dialogue around what is a purpose and need statement, and how do we establish a community vision and values. In order for all of that to occur, we need to ensure that we have an application for that community advisory group to go live first part of December. We would close that before some of the holidays, where typically we see individuals take a little time off. And then we would hope to be able to have the first meeting of that community advisory group in mid to late January. It's a fast timeline. We want to, like I said, make sure that we are honoring our commitments to equity and inclusion. And so we've been very thoughtful about how do we do some of that outreach, recognizing that outreach needs to happen sooner rather than later. I think at this point, we'd like to kind of open up the conversation for questions. And we certainly have kind of a big question here for you, which is your comfort around us beginning some of that outreach for the recruitment of potential members to stand up the community advisory group as we've described in this framework and in the timeline that we've presented. I would also just add that we've really appreciated the thoughtful input by all of the partner agency staff. It's really helped us to be able to frame this community advisory group, and we've taken that input, made some changes so that what we're bringing to you today is really reflective of the work that we've done in collaboration. So with that, I think Jonelle and I are both open to any questions that you might have.
So can you, and Aaron, leave the question up there from Lisa to the group for a sec. And then Lisa, I want to get right on to the Q&A and discussion. This is really the first task of the executive steering group, and we're gently putting this in front of you today, but we want to pace this, okay? We have a solid half hour, a little bit more for first, what are your questions? Do you have any concerns? What do you want to know more about the framework, the schedule, the pacing, the components? And this is both from the equity and from the community forum perspective. And then we also want to really gently pose this question in front of you to see if we could get your concurrence today. And so I'm just going to read it out loud one more time, that what we're seeking here is an answer to this question. Is there ESG concurrence today to begin outreach for recruitment of potential members to stand up the community advisory group as described in the framework and timeline presented? So, you know, when we ask a question, we want to practice being really careful with you, that the words make sense, that you understand what you're being asked to align around. And in essence, we are trying to get your consensus support to allow program staff to start to open the door, if you will, on that recruitment, on that outreach, on that beginning to engage and seeking nominations and membership for the CAG, okay? So I want to now take us back, and thank you so much for that great presentation, Lisa and Janelle, and go ahead and open up the screen just for any questions, answer, group discussion. And then I'll kind of watch the time so that I leave us enough to kind of come back to this question that's on the table. And anybody who's kind of top of mind, go ahead, Kristen, sure.
First, I just right from the start want to put out a concurrent, you know, that we love the idea of the outreach starting. So you have a yes vote from the Port of Portland on, you know, how important this is and to be moving quickly. I guess my biggest question is the list of stakeholders and interests. I think it's very comprehensive. You've done an amazing job of kind of thinking through all of the different interests, but it's 19 different interests long. And we're talking about trying to keep the total number of KEG members at 25. And simultaneously, we have communities on the two sides of the river that may not feel like if there's a business interest, you know, coming from Portland or a business interest coming from Vancouver, that represents everyone. So this is a thankless project that everyone has on their hands of thinking about how to do this. But how are you contemplating this work of trying to keep the list at 25 when there are so many key stakeholders and 2 states?
That's a great question. One that we have talked about quite a bit because it will be a challenge. I think that our hope here is that we're going to find representative voices that may have more than one perspective to share. And we also really want to be open and flexible enough to ensure that we are reflecting stakeholder input. So while the goal is 25, I certainly don't think that it's a rigid goal of 25. I think we have to really be open to ensuring that we are standing this group up, that we really do feel like authentically it is reflective of both communities and of the stakeholder interests. We don't want to start the project in a deficit. We want to start with the right tone up front first.
And if I can add on, some of the groups that are represented may fall into that subgroup category that's looking at specific issues. So we want to reach out and try and structure this in a way that we don't have this thing is unwieldy. So if the non-motorized or bicyclist group, if that is their only interest, we may put them on a sub-team or a subgroup to deal with that issue and not be in that all-inclusive 25.
Yeah. I'll also say from a process perspective, sometimes you can see that there are groups that are used to working together, almost like a coalition type basis that could have 1 seat for 6 at the table. And so I think we'll be looking to also see if some of those may be able to do the wraparound, but lots of moving parts on that one. So I see Lynn's hand has been up and then Anne. Go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you. Again, I think it's a very comprehensive list. I guess I just want to ask 2 questions. One, my background on this project is from various different perspectives, but the one that stands out in my mind is being chair of Clackamas County the last time we had this conversation. And I guess what I need is more reassurance that the folks will be region wide. And the reason that's so important is that we have businesses that along Highway 26 and 205, and I know the port is representing some of that business interest on I-205, but that was not clearly defined last time, how the system is going to work together with this project, and it created a lot of angst. So whether it's elected official representation or business interest, we have industrial areas along these corridors that will be impacted, whether that be at Gateway or at the Clackamas industrial area or even Wilsonville. So I think we need to think about how these play together and how we get more representation from the larger region and not just from around the project, because we need to understand what the impacts are going to be with or without I-205 tolling in the future. It's an important voice that needs to be heard, both in Washington County and Clackamas County. That's my first point. The second question is, I might have missed it, but we've got a lot of groups that we're trying to bring on here that don't represent organizations that have a lot of money. And I want to make sure that we're willing to step up and be able to reimburse people for their time and expertise on this committee, because they're, as we all know, they're not paid to do this work. And we really need to make sure that we don't make that a barrier. So however we can do that, I know it's been talked about in the past. I just want to make sure that we don't lose that voice.
I couldn't agree any stronger. So we really are committed to reducing as many barriers as possible. And we think that's an essential part of this recommendation as well. And the regional, so that was probably your second. The regional approach comment is also a critically important comment, and really part of the reason that we see this as being an outreach effort as we get started, as opposed to, we have an application that's gone live and there's a press release. We hope that we have communities that will sign up and submit an application. We think that it is much more important for us to be in those communities and having those dialogues to ensure that we have individuals that understand what it is that we're trying to achieve and that they do have the opportunity to participate.
All right, let me be very clear.
Okay.
I'm not going to support this today until that becomes much more clear about how we can get representation from the larger, broader region, Vancouver, as well as the Portland region. That voice needs to be at the table. So it almost needs to be a seat. And even if that person that we pick is from Washington County or from Clackamas County, that they're expected to represent the outlying areas and how these highways and these businesses and these industrial areas that we depend on along these highways are going to be affected. And so just, I don't mean to be a stick in the mud, but this is really, really important to the entirety of the region.
President Peterson, if I could just jump in real quick and just say that, amen. And that's part of the work, as you know, because we're coordinating closely on the comprehensive congestion management plan and making sure that all these pieces are tied together. So obviously a lot of concurrence on my behalf, and I know you know that we feel the same way as we're coordinating efforts throughout the region because they're all, including this program, they're all pieces to a bigger puzzle.
Okay, so let's have people keep thinking. And Lynn, I'm running this list and I'm realizing now with having two Lyns, I'll have Lynn Peterson and Lynn Valenter and help to do better on that. And I also saw hands come up first from Anne and then next from Doug.
Lynn, thank you for the comment about barriers. I think what's going to be important for me is that first bullet under membership eligibility criteria, and the key phrase in there that these are members that want to advance the bridge replacement project. So we will be getting applicants from the at-large piece whose goal is not to advance the bridge, and I'm excited to see that that will be one of the pieces of criteria that will be important.
Thank you for that. And Doug, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for all the work on this. This is actually very helpful. I have a couple points and then actually one question. The first one, I think it is very imperative that as soon as we can work through these other adjustments in this conversation that's happening right now, I think it's very important and imperative that this committee gets set up quickly. I think it needs to norm form. They've not had the privilege, some of them, of getting up to speed on some of the knowledge that we've all had, either because of our own backgrounds or the committee time we've invested. So I think they need a chance to catch up because we're going to come at them pretty darn quick with a bunch of really important information. So I think we owe that to that group to get going. Point one, I very much support that this project must be coordinated. I think, Brendan, you got to this issue. This must be coordinated with all the other regional work on both sides of the water that are going in, whether it be the congestion pricing work and all the other things. So this should not be just kept in isolation. And I think it's very important. This thing should fit hand in glove with the other projects, as opposed to one starts to veer off a little bit differently than the other. So the network approach, the network approach, to me, I think is really, really important. And the last point I would add is, which gets to also Lynn's comment around the regional side, but that all the elements of the regional side, the other not just the interest groups, but also the other work groups as well. And the last one was around the point you had 80% reference there. And I think you did talk to that, Lisa, and that was really good. I really would be curious, if not now, down the road, who is that 20% when it's 1 in 5 of the total? I wouldn't want to underestimate, just kind of leave that off in the corner, some 20% and off it goes. So I wouldn't mind understanding what that is beyond that group focus at the right time. So I'll just leave it there unless you had comments now. Thank you.
I can speak a little to this, and then I wasn't sure, Greg, if you were wanting to add any other comments. We know that there's been some statewide organizations, whether that be freight or contracting organizations that may or may not have an organizational seat in the Vancouver or Portland area. I think it does also speak a little bit to what President Peterson was mentioning regarding the idea that this is a regional project. So, I do think that it is important that we don't look at your home address is a zip code within Portland or within Vancouver, that we are looking at this a little broader. So we wanted to keep the flexibility to be able to bring in folks that had a regional perspective and or that might be an organization that doesn't have an office here in Vancouver or Portland.
So my comment was to amend the list to add a bullet for regional-based organizations. We have a community-based organization bullet. So it's our intent, and I think we embedded it in there, but we weren't explicit. So if we say regional-based organization as a separate bullet, does that address the concerns that we're not just looking myopically, that we are looking regionally?
Yeah, I think that would get more like the industrial users organizations, as an example, that would help. Thank you.
I just want to add on this. I'm really curious. Sort of the data becomes important here as to who uses this bridge or who may use this in the future. There's and I used to work for a multinational company for a long time, and they wouldn't show up at TARPEX like this, yet they're huge users on the coastal I-5 route. And so they may in fact be regional plus in my mind. So I just want to make sure that in the data, if there's a group of that within that 20% that represents beyond the region, but actually high potential users, I think that might be helpful, not just local regional, but regional plus in my mind.
And what are you calling that? Region?
I just made the word up.
Yeah, you did. What's it called? Region plus?
I just call it regional plus.
Regional
so we're looking
plus
at it from a network perspective. There are many national trucking companies that go up and down that coast, of which this is just one bridge on their whole network up and down the coast, as we all know, on I-5. And if we look at Cascadia, kind of that Cascadia mindset or beyond on a coastal basis, what data is in there that may, that they don't reside here, but they're high users, particularly if we get into things like congestion pricing, things of that nature down the road. So making sure the usage of the bridge represents something beyond the region.
And Doug, I think we tried to capture that element in the trucking/freight bullet. I think it's the 5th bullet. So if we need to refine that or broaden that, but that is an important element. We need to know origin destination of some of the freight movements in the corridor and what it means to what we're doing, what it means to those freight movements. So yeah, that's an important element.
Okay. So go ahead. No,
I think what Doug raised is really important. I just don't want to lose the aspect of what I'm trying to get at is the land use within the Portland metro region, and how we obviously don't want to just move congestion around, right? We don't want to move it from one spot to another. I know it's when we started this conversation back when Ed had that first conversation back in the 90s, the study area that was drawn at that time was much larger, right? It got narrowed down into the last iteration so tightly that we couldn't have this conversation. And so I guess I'm just coming from the place-based of the rest of the region of not being, not impacting so negatively the rest of our business community in the region that we then have to clean that up later.
Okay. Really helpful, and thank you. And the explanation helps. And so my team has told me it's really hard to edit on these slides. They're just all in PDF for this screen, and it's the wordsmithing. So there's two next steps here that I'm hearing. So I want to be really explicit. One is that I think just under the trucking freight, we could put another slash and just call it regional plus users or something, you know, we'll think of something that gets to your piece, Doug, and then Lynn, a separate bullet. So a specific bullet that's region-wide representation. And if we need another word to better say it in the stakeholder groups, we can. But what I want to, oh, go ahead, Greg.
This is Roger Millar.
Oh, Roger, sure.
And perhaps, you know, this slide shows the types of interests.
Mm-hmm.
And the geographic extent of that interest could apply to any of these groups. The next slide, I think, talked about our interest in 80% of them, wherever the one was about, yeah, perhaps here on CAG membership, rather than trying to identify an environmental group with a local perspective, and an environmental group with a regional perspective, and an environmental group with a national perspective, we ensure that we have a diverse range of perspectives, including a geographic perspective that encompasses the economic shed, the environmental shed, the land use shed, would address this issue better. Because I think when you start parsing all of those different groups by geographic extents, pretty soon you have 200 people around the table. And Lynn's comment about making sure that Clackamas County business interests, and for that matter, Washington County business interests, and for that matter, Longview business interests, feel like they're being heard. We can address that, or I would suggest that we could address that by making sure that that diverse range of perspectives includes the geography. You know, the political boundaries are one thing, but we have an economic shed that is affected by the project, and that is truly regional, if not national. We have an air shed, we have a water shed, and on and on and on. Just making sure that we're covering it that way, as opposed to trying to parse out all of those interest types, would be my suggestion.
Yeah. It's a really nice way. It's creating a different lens, if you will. And so the layering, it really helps, I think, with this iterative approach and the different entry points. But what you're doing is, by the time we bring this back to you, and again, remember the pacing that Lisa and Janelle talked about, is, you know, the interest in getting started soon. There could be a check back at the end of November, but by early January, there's an interest in bringing back a proposed set of stakeholders. And we want that litmus test back with all of you. Does it meet these expectations and the criteria you're all talking about? So are there others top of mind? Chris, go ahead.
So Deb, just a couple of quick comments. So I want to second the comments made by Secretary Millar and President Peterson, in that I think there are ways to accommodate those diverse viewpoints, and I think we have to make sure that we are capturing those, because one of the things, and I can tell you through my own lived experience, we spent an inordinate amount of time talking about those that were immediately and directly impacted, almost from a specific right-of-way lens last time, as opposed to those that were beyond that. And that's not to suggest that we didn't go beyond that, but it certainly felt a little more condensed. What we know now is that individual projects are fantastic as long as they're contributing to a whole. And that whole takes a conversation that is comprehensive, and recognizing that you can't let the comprehensive nature slow you down to the point where you don't make progress, but you do have to recognize the importance of what that comprehensive contribution is going to be. And so I think that those are important factors. I recognize the importance of keeping the committee at a manageable level. And I think from my perspective, to the points made by both of the previous comments, I think the way to do that is to be very explicit about what we're expecting out of those individuals that are coming to the table, and that they're expected to represent a broader voice and maybe multiple voices as they go forward as well. We are in a two-way dialogue here. We do have a level of expectation that's on us as well as all of our committee members. And there's a lot of work in front of us. And I'm looking forward to how that work then comes forward. But I do think being explicit about that really will help in this, because I do know a lot of folks are really going to bring their individual issues. But if we ask them and task them with, we need you to be looking at a broad perspective, I do know that many of our regional partners will come to the table with that on the private and the public side. I think the last thing that I would say is one of the things that I've been witnessing and experiencing, not just in my career, but very acutely over the last couple of years, is when we start big programs and when we start conversations, to the extent that we can start those on the right foot by having early conversations, especially with those that are potentially impacted and especially those that we've historically forgotten, the earlier the better. And so in my mind, I want to push that conversation forward, even if we have to adjust as we get going, because frankly, the worst thing we can do is to start from a position of we left somebody out and we've been going for 3 months. I'd much rather say we left somebody out unintentionally and we're going to bring them to the table later and get the conversation going with those communities that we haven't had the opportunity to speak with. And then I did say finally before, but I do have one more, which is I'm really hoping that we can get some insights from Mr. Washington and Ms. Valentin just on how they think this coming together would really be helpful in capturing those regional voices based on what they're hearing here.
Thanks so much, Chris. Juliana, your hand was up, and then I'll make sure to call on everybody else at least once before we see where we're at. Go ahead, Juliana.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo a lot of the comments made about the, starting early, getting this group set up, as well as the regional impacts that this bridge has. I think sometimes we forget that we are a gateway for the east side of the states and beyond. And so just how do we make sure that we're recognizing that there's a lot, not only does our local community or regional community rely on us, but we have many communities across the state as well as in the Midwest that really get impacted by our ability to have this reliable, network that we're talking about. And the I-5 bridge is a key component of that. So just wanted to reiterate that from the regional perspective.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Who wants to go next that hasn't spoken yet? Sonia? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for elevating this part of the work and this conversation to this group, and to folks for being so smart and thoughtful about how to set it up to be successful, including learning from last time. I've really appreciated hearing all of that input. And couple thoughts. We are really glad to have the co-chairs as part of this committee. I think that's an important connection point. And I want to reflect back 2 things I heard that we really agreed with. The first, I think, was Kristen talking about the need to stay flexible and be open to right-sizing this group to make sure that it's got the right composition of perspectives and people. And then President Peterson talked about the need to resource and support participation. I think that's really important. I don't know, we're talking a lot about stipends at the city, but I know there is a whole toolkit to help make sure that people can successfully participate. So we are really supportive of whatever that kind of best practice proposed approach would be. And then the last comment is that the proposal here is aggressive, both in its sweep and in its timeline, ambitious, I should say. I think we're really interested, we're really supportive of it, and we're really interested in hearing, given the timeline, how we can, the city with our platform and our channels, help make sure that the word is getting out and that we're contributing to successful application and impaneling.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
So Deb, if I can speak to the issue of of stipend and barriers to participation. Our team has been looking at that issue, and Lisa spoke to it somewhat, but we are doing somewhat of a national best practices look, as well as what local organizations and local entities do here, so we can get that piece right. We recognize that is going to be key to getting some underrepresented segments to the table and keeping them at the table. So it is not something that has escaped us or something that we take lightly. So that is part of our agenda to do a sweep. As a matter of fact, we're bringing in a person who's going to be part of the team from Chicago, who has a lot of equity work and community engagement work to look at nationally that very issue. So.
Thank you for that, Greg. Lynn or Ed, any thoughts at this point?
Yes, Ed, here. I first like to say that I was very impressed with the work that Janelle and Lisa did on this. And I was really impressed with all of the various categories of people or organizations and people and that they chose. I think that in these type of situations, we always like to sort of we'll have a mark and we'll say, well, this is, there'll be 25. I think what I would suggest on that is that perhaps just listening to everything that's been said this morning, I like someone spoke, and I think it's more like a layering effect that you can bring in various other people that are similar sort of under one umbrella. But I would probably say that you ought to maybe have something in that says that you will put this group together, but that will not exceed, may say like 30 members, because it looked like we needed about 3 or 4 more people to it. So I think you should build in a little bit of flexibility. And 30, if you've got 25 people around the table, if you go 5 or 6 or 7 more, that's not going to destroy it. I mean, that's manageable, but it still enables you to bring in some additional people. And one of the first things I thought when I saw it, I thought that there needs to be a little bit more regional. So I'm glad that Lynn brought that up, and also I'm glad that she brought up the helping people out a little bit. I don't think people come to these committees expecting to take home a paycheck, but many times they just need help on their gas or it's just little stuff. It's not big, but I think if we start looking at those kinds of things, I think we will let people know that we're just not trying to do for nothing, that we at least can put a little piece of gas in their car. So that's just sort of my thoughts right now, but I was very impressed with the initial list. I think it has lots of possibilities, really do.
Appreciate the feedback, thank you. And Lynn?
I concur with Ed's thoughts. I think by targeting 25 and being able to flex a little bit, that makes sense. I am cautious of having it grow too much more, because at some point it just becomes difficult to manage, difficult to have shared understanding, time for everyone to have a voice. I suspect, or I believe, that as we look to the representation, as I think Lisa and Janelle both noted, if we look, not only am I representing this community or this stakeholder, but am I representing this geographic region and this impacted community, I suspect that if we overlay a matrix, we can be intentional and inclusive without doubling, which I think was, I don't remember whose first question, but if you've got 19, how do you not make that 38, and then you've got 5 at large, and so we're already over that. So I think the team has already considered these, and as Ed notes, I think, you know, there may well be a group that's not represented in that matrix examination, and we can certainly be open to including it. But I very much appreciate the work that the precursor development has done around, if someone resigns, if they're an organization rep, then they have this. We might want to think about, if they're an organization rep and they're representing multiple communities, if the replacement organization rep would also represent those same communities. But I just feel like there's been a great deal of really significant thought and consideration and alternatives. But I also think, I think it was Chris Strickler who said, you know, we do need to begin. We can't just keep holding and not launch. And then there's time to revise as we go. I think we have to be open to much of that. So I'm excited to get started, and I really appreciate having heard the input from a variety of people. So thank you for the candid and open conversation.
Great, thank you so much. So I just saw Doug's hand come up, and then I am going to do a quick check with Sean and Scott, just in case you have any other reflections or questions. And then I will head once around the virtual table for a check for concurrence. And I'm going to try to do that all fairly efficiently. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. I'll say it briefly. I think locking in on a number, I think, might be wrong. I think if you have a target of 25, allow the group who are going to have to live with it, the accountability. They'll have a better feel than, frankly, some of us at this table. I think it's us trusting the people who have the lead underneath us, and they will manage the right decision on balance and the connectivity, because they're going to have the accountability of having to land it successfully. I think part of our job is also to set the direction, but then get out.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. And then I just want to do a quick check, Sean and Scott. Sean, any reflections, comments?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with Lynn's statements about ensuring that the group is at a manageable place. Doesn't have to be exactly 25. If we need a couple more, we can certainly work through that process. But as I have stated before, I think that piece about equitable representation for the entire region is critical. I 100% agree with that, not just, and I guess my concern was largely from the Clark County perspective, but when you think about it in terms of the entire Vancouver, Portland Metroplex, that we do have other areas of representation that exist outside the boundary, and especially with the freight component piece, either along the river or on the road. I think there is an opportunity for us to ensure that we have equity in the groups that we're representing. So I want to make sure we do that.
Yeah, I was going to bring
Sorry,
up,
go ahead.
I had a quick question on when we talk to these groups, how that is done. Just one example is, it said tribes. And as far as I know, there's only one tribe even close, and that's our Cowlitz Reservation up here in North Clark County. And we have a very good relationship with them. The RTC does, and so does the Port of Ridgefield and City of Ridgefield. So we can get you in contact with that kind of stuff. I just was curious on that process. But the other one was, I was going to call in earlier, or make a question earlier. You were talking about transportation and freight, and then river users. And I thought about all of our tugboat companies that we have. And to go with Juliana, in fact, I was going to text her this. I can kind of do it over the internet now. Juliana could probably handle all of their concerns, because I don't think there's going to be much concerns. I think the bridge will probably be high enough, but they will have their input. They should have their input. But I think Juliana, because of their relationship with all these people and where they're at, and being the third largest port in the state of Washington, could probably handle their interests too. So we aren't bumping up these interests. Every single group, like groups, should get together and have a representative.
Appreciate the thoughtfulness. Thank you. So I am going to ask Aaron if you could pop back up the question on the screen for me. And a couple of things I want to say as we ask the question. First is, especially to our audience listening, I want to remind you that this framework that Janelle and Lisa walked you through is already posted on the website. It was distributed in advance. That's a document that we're working off of. I also want to remind everybody that we're talking about the first piece, if you will. And so it's this question to the group is there ESG concurrence today to begin outreach for recruitment of potential members to stand up the community advisory group as described in the framework and timeline presented. So a stepwise approach, can they have your concurrence and support? And what I'm gonna do, because I'm gonna try and do this efficiently, and that's so nice, Mayor Ann, that you did a thumbs up. I really miss you being in the room with me. What I do is when I ask for consensus support, I tell you to leave your 10 card down if you're in concurrence, and if you disagree, you put it up, and then we work with the people whose cards are up. What I wanna do here is if you're okay with this moving forward, I'm going to ask you, because I can actually see all of you, and I'll say it out loud. If you put your thumbs up for support, thumbs sideways because you're on the fence, thumbs down for no support. And this is not voting. This is seeking consensus. I want to make that perfectly clear. Okay. And if you could do that now, and I'll say out loud what I'm seeing. And so, and I don't have Ed's thumb near a screen. So just, you get to pick whatever it is you want to do. And same with Sean and Chris, you get to be included, I think, and Roger also, you're part of the group. So what I'm going to do is look around the screen, and Ed, which way is your thumb going? For support. This is around, is there consensus support to allow moving forward with formation of the CAG? So a yes from Ed, a yes from Scott, a yes from Kristen, a yes from Ann, Roger, a yes from Juliana, a yes from Sean, a yes from Sonia, a yes from Lynn, a yes from Doug, a yes from, Lynn Valenter, I should say both, and a yes from Chris. So what I see is 12 of you have said that there is support for and concurrence with moving forward to begin the outreach. And I want to thank you for that effort. What that means is you have full consensus support for moving forward. I also want to make sure that that meant it comes with the questions, the input, the advice that you gave on how to do it well with a high level of both quality and content. And I want to thank extensively Lisa and Janelle for both the presentations, for the question, for the hard work and dedication with the staff from your organizations and yourselves in pulling together a framework really high caliber to start in a really positive way. So thank you and congratulations on that. And I get to make applause around the screens. So what I do want to say that we're now, and you go ahead and take this slide down, and then we are now going to move into the opportunity for public input. And I hope for our audience that's been listening that you found the meeting important and helpful for you. And we want to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts. So we have an approach here. And hopefully if you were with us at the beginning of the meeting, you heard that we need you in the Zoom meeting. And so hopefully you're in that Zoom room right now, which allows you to raise your hand to let us know that you want to provide some public input. If you join by phone, you need to press the *9 to be able to raise your hand. And then the other piece that we need is we just want to be able to see how many people want to provide public input, because then I divide it up between the numbers that are requesting the opportunity. I have 3 hands that have come up so far, and I'm going to give a chance for some hands to come up. And while those folks are raising their hands, I want to say I'm going to use my handy dandy phone. I know I always tell you to stay off your phone, but I'm going to use it just to keep time. This is our extensively technical way of doing this. And then I'm just going to divide the amount of time among our speakers. I want to remind our audience that's here with us today that you're also welcome to provide your input via the email that we're providing. It should be there for you either on the YouTube and the Zoom. And if you can't find it, it's on the website. So you can submit written comment. You can also leave a voicemail message to the program. And we had a little bit of public input that came in before the meeting. We summarized it for executive steering group members. We'll do the same thing after the meeting. If anything else comes in after the meeting, we'll go ahead and summarize that. We will be producing a high-level meeting summary. So we'll attach all that input to the summary. It'll all get posted back up on the website along with the public input we hear today. So what I see are 4 hands. So what I want to do is I'll give each of the 4 speakers that we have on our list. And Aaron, am I correct? I have 4. Did I miss anybody? Yeah. If you're on mute, Aaron, I'm not sure.
Yep, sorry, 4 is correct.
Yes, 4 is correct. Then I'm going to divide it by 3. Okay, so we can have 12 minutes total. And then I will time it. You're welcome to take up to the 3 minutes. You don't have to talk for the full 3. And I see John Lay, Chris Smith, Peter Stark, and Alex Caval. So John Lay, you get to go first. And I think we'll take you off mute. And I'll start the clock. Go ahead, welcome. And if you could also tell us if you have an affiliation or just as you introduce yourself, and then go ahead with your comment.
Good morning, John Lee from Southwest Washington. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate the opportunity. What I did not hear this morning is any discussion about a voice for the taxpayer. I did not hear any discussion about equity for taxpayers. Overwhelmingly, the question should be, where's the value and what do the people want? Overwhelmingly, people want a reduction in traffic congestion. We do not want to be managed. We want a reduction. We want to improve our commute times. We want to be able to travel where and when we want in an efficient manner. I heard mention that there is a draft finance plan due in December of 2020. Can anybody tell me what the cost of the project is? If you don't know the cost, how can you come up with the finance plan? In the failed CRC, the bridge was $792 million. If we had only focused on replacing the bridge, we would not be here today. They'd be building that replacement bridge. Instead, it turned into a $3.5 billion boondoggle. We need to provide what the people want. Number 2, the citizens in North Portland, in Ed Washington's community, do not want more traffic dumped into their neighborhoods. So how many lanes are we talking? If you build a 10-lane wide bridge, when the Rose Quarter is choked down to just 2 through lanes, that dumps a lot of congestion into the North Portland neighborhood that they do not want. The real question is, the Rose Quarter is the bottleneck, and until that is fixed, we need to do something that will not cause a bottleneck in North Portland to address the concerns of that community. Finally, there are presently 80,000 vehicle diversions in the region, and ODOT has told us that with the tolling, there will be an additional 50,000 traffic diversions. That goes exactly to what Lynn Peterson talked about. We don't want to be spreading the congestion and the nightmare around everywhere. We want to solve traffic congestion. And therefore, they should be looking at the origination and destination requirements of the people in cars and trucks, and actually providing transportation avenues, transportation corridors for where those people want to travel to, instead of just focusing on simply a 5-mile area.
Okay. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate your input and your comment today. And next up is Chris Smith. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, we'll take you off mute.
Good morning. I'm Chris Smith. I wear several hats. I'm a member of the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission. I'm also a leader of a group known as No More Freeway Expansions. And I will, while I'm speaking as an individual today, I'll be primarily using the lens of that group. This project is billed as a replacement. I'd like to caution that it not become an expansion. There are a lot of good reasons to replace this bridge, from seismic resilience to providing an opportunity for high capacity transit. But I would urge you to make one of your goals for this project that it does not reduce drive alone, or does not increase drive alone auto trips. To put it in wonky terms, the SOV VMT should stay constant or be reduced. And that's primarily from a lens of climate, as well as environmental health in general. On the question of equity, I was encouraged that Janelle called out both climate action and youth, so we have some intergenerational equity. I would urge you to look at the intersection of those two, and in your governance structures, specifically look for the youth climate movements who are very motivated and engaged in this region, and make sure they are well represented in your governance structures. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us, Chris. Appreciate it. Next up is Peter Stark. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. I don't think Peter's off mute.
Oh, there. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can. Good. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. My name is Peter Stark. I like Chris, I sit on a number of different committees, including the Portland Streetcar, but I'm speaking on behalf of what I see, some things that I've gone through on other committees. One of them is when you get a committee as large as about 25 or 30 people, if everybody were to just speak for 5 minutes, you end up not being able to really accomplish a lot. So I would certainly urge that you try to select committee members that represent multiple groups so that you're able to hit most of those bullet points. And I actually agree a lot with what Lynn was suggesting, that we need to look at this more regionally. But I'm gonna take the lens in the opposite direction. One bullet point that was not specifically listed, other than within the north and northeast neighborhoods, is Hayden Island. And Hayden Island is unique in that it's directly impacted by the construction and the phasing of this project. And so, although I think that a representative from Hayden Island could represent other groups as well, I think it's important that you have at least one individual that understands the island and is able to address the concerns of how traffic will be handled and how business will be impacted during the construction. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Peter. Appreciate the input. And next up, and I believe it's our last, and I'll just make sure, it looks like I have one person left, is Alex Caval. Welcome, and if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Alex Koval. I work for Clark County Developmental Disability Program. I am here as a citizen, and I just thought that this was very informational, A, and B, I have one concern on the bullet points, and that is, did you think about disability people when coming up with those bullet points? Because if you haven't, you should. It's a very, very, very difficult thing. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Appreciate your words, Alex. Thank you for being with us. We do have one hand that came up, and we have a couple minutes left, so I'd like to still call on Steve Fisher. Go ahead, Steve, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, my name is Steve Fisher. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can, yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm the Coast Guard Bridge Administrator, and I just wanted to, just say something you guys already know. But, these are maritime cities and maritime ports. And, I heard, Mr. Hughes talked about tugboats, and there was a couple references to river users, but I just want to emphasize, because that's my job, is just, the importance of really including all the maritime users, because it is such a big maritime interest there in Portland and in Vancouver. I'm not sure that the port is the right group of folks to represent all of the maritime interests. There's lots of maritime interest. And, maybe something like the Harbor Safety Committee would be a better avenue. I'm just brainstorming right now. And I also wanted to just make sure everyone knew that the Coast Guard permit that was issued back for CRC is expired. So, a new navigational impact study will have to be done to determine the correct horizontal and vertical clearances. And that's all I had to say.
Really glad you're here. Thank you so much for the comments. It looks like that's all the hands that we had up for the public input. And so on the screen, just one last time for folks to see, please, if anybody else who's listening wants to submit comment, please do so by emailing at this interstate bridge at washdot@washington.gov. wsdot.wa.gov, or call the phone number 360-905-1560 and state ESG public comment in your message. And that will also be transcribed. And again, all of this that comes in, and this will be a regular process, so everybody knows the before, during, and after meetings will all get included with the meeting summary, as well as always posted to the website. So your ESG members will always receive your input. Thank you to our audience and to our members of the public that are here with us virtually in this room, and we hope someday soon enough all back in a room together in person. So we're gonna move on to next steps. And we have been pacing ourselves really quickly today, and I want to thank you for your careful listening, executive steering group members. I know we asked a lot of you, you did a lot of advanced prep, you're here with us, we know there's a lot of next steps. What I do want to say is, right before I jump into the next steps, is on a regular basis, I hope what you're starting to see is we'll always do a little bit of where have you been, where you're at, and where you're going. It's a bit of a moniker of how to help move us forward and keep that common foundation of information. So at your next meeting, what you should be seeing is you'll always be getting updates on activities from both equity and from the community advisory group. So both of those are going to come forward at the next meeting. We are going to be asking you yourselves to finalize your charter. We got some great feedback from you today. We heard reflections that you're pretty close, but you want some more time with your teams to read it carefully yourselves. And that from now until the November 30th meeting, you'll let us know, if possible, in advance, if you do have any heartburn or any edits that you'd like to suggest. If we do get some track change edits, we'll make sure to send a revised draft out to all of you in advance of the meeting. You'll always see your materials no less than a week, and if we can, sooner. And whenever we send materials, we'll always be posting to the website. So we'll always have ways for the public to stay engaged as we move forward. And then at your November 30th meeting, these will be your topics. So the one is to first finalize your charter together. The second is to hear more on the progress related to the equity topic and the equity advisory group, as well as feedback about how it's going for standing up the CAG and some more next steps or check-ins as needed. And then we'll really start to warm up the topic of both purpose and need and vision and values. So we'll try at each meeting to, by the time you finish, have kind of warmed up your topics for the next meeting. That's what we're hoping you'll start to see, because when you get to that meeting in January, which, by the way, we still need to calendar meetings for 2021, we're going to want you to have a chance to start taking a deep dive on those topics. Okay. So those are the topics and the next steps related to them. I just want to pause in case you have questions on any of that. Just kind of wave a hand if you do. Okay. Then the other, and we'll take this offline, is really the logistics of setting up regular meetings for you. We know this next meeting is already on the calendar for Monday, November 30th, 1 to 3 p.m. We're likely to keep your meetings kind of in the 2 to 3 hour window, depending on, how deep you have to take on certain topics. We would appreciate if in the beginning we could try to schedule monthly meetings, just there's a lot of work to do in these early months, and we'd be really grateful if we could have a monthly check-in with you. What we're going to do is work with you and your teams to look for a place in between all the other meetings we know that you're at on a regular basis. Try to find that sweet spot. And as soon as possible after today, we'll start doing that. So you'll start to see that regularly on your calendar. I don't know that I have other action items, and I first want to check with Greg, and then I was going to hand it back to Secretary Millar and to Director Strickler to wrap up the meeting. So Greg, anything else you want to say?
No, nothing from me. This has been a very successful meeting to put issues on the table and start moving and marching things along. So great job, everybody.
Okay, all right. And any of our ESG members, before we turn back to close the meeting, Ed, did you want to say something?
No, I was just concurring with Greg.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Anybody else before we had to wrap up? Okay, so Erin, you can take down that slide, and I think we'll just look for some closing remarks or any thoughts or reflections from Director Strickler and Secretary Millar. I don't know who wants to go first.
maybe I'll jump in, Deb, and then leave it for Secretary Millar to close us out. I just wanted to say thank you to the group. I'm excited about the fact that we're getting going. I really like the partnership that we saw already in this first discussion. I'll note that we actually did accomplish quite a bit, but one thing that's very tangible, which is getting started with our community engagement outreach and efforts. So I appreciate that and recognize the urgency that the team that we have in front of us has recognized. And then finally, I want to say thank you to the entire project team that's pulled all of the information together, I think in a very comprehensive way. I think you're really showing that you're approaching this from a listen first and move forward next kind of approach, which is definitely what we need. And so I just want to send my appreciation to the project team and all who are involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And I too would like to thank the project team and all of you and your staffs. We're started, and it's been a long time coming, but I think we've started right. And it was really important to me and to Governor Inslee that we get this project going, but that we get it going the right way. We have a structure. We have a group of leaders in yourselves. We're creating the Citizens Advisory Group. There's lots of good stuff put together in a very well thought out way. And as you could hear from the public comment, that's going to be important as we move forward, because there are different perspectives about what's needed as we replace the I-5 bridge. My concern is first and foremost state of good repair and safety, the resilience of a critical link in our transportation system. But we have to look at system management. We have to look at demand management. We have to look at system expansion in an integrated multimodal sense. And we're going to have some heavy lifts and some hard decisions in front of us, but I think we're putting the structure in place to get to the finish line. So thank you all for your participation, your active participation, your great ideas, and we'll see you at the next meeting, if not before.
Thank you so much, everybody. Please stay safe, stay healthy, take good care of yourself, and meeting adjourned. Take care.